A Christmas Art Journal tutorial by Creative Katie. That's me, Karen Burchill. 4 Calling Birds. Featuring Tim Holtz, Crazy Birds. Hit the subscribe button in the lower right hand corner, that way you won't miss any upcoming videos. So I decided that I'm going to use my gelatos or gel sticks. I have a combination of the two. This was one of the items that I absolutely had to have. I fell in love watching videos of seeing people use these, and I simply don't use them. So I obviously don't have a whole lot of expertise in it. I tried putting it on dry and using a baby wipe. That takes off too much. I'm spritzing it with water. I find the brush works. I'm just putzing around trying to get the level and depth of color. This is going to be, or supposed to be, the Christmas tree. And I want some of the lights in there, some blues and greens. And so I'm using a whole variety of the gelatos or gel sticks. I find that by adding the blue, you get lots of depth of color. Same thing with the yellow. Now my initial intent was to use my Inktense blocks and do the salt technique. So I'm going to give it a try using the gelatos and the salt technique. I want to get that texture that looks like the needles of the spruce or evergreen tree. So I want some depth of color, and I'm finding I'm struggling trying to get the gelatos to give me the depth of color that I like. And I want it to be wet enough so that the salt technique works. So I challenge anybody, if you've got something in your stash that you're simply not using, get it out and start using it. Leave a comment below about what that item is, and then come back and tell me when you've used that. You might as well use it and then open it up for the space for something else that you do love. So there I'm sprinkling sea salt all over the page. And then I let it dry for a bit, but I do go in with the heat tool. Once it's completely dry, and it typically takes quite a while, I'm just rubbing gently to get the salt off. This is a messy job. No matter what you do or how you do it, it's still going to be messy. Just using the pads of my finger, you're going to get the paint on your fingers. If there's any place that is wet, stop, bring out the heat tool and dry it so that you get the maximum benefit from the salt technique. So then I'm bringing out my Hooker's Green, the Liquitex Basics, and I have this clear stamp that was gifted to me by Peg. I won a draw on her YouTube channel, and this was one of the goodies that she had sent to me. And it struck me that this kind of flourish looked a little like evergreen branches. And so that's how I'm repurposing it. And I'm just putting them here and there, applying the acrylic paint with a makeup sponge, or I'm not sure if it's a piece of cut and dry foam. I find that it works better off the block, so that's how I've evolved as time goes on. Then I wanted some bling on here, so I got this stamper's block from Stamp Pandas, and I'm applying gold. I think this is the Michaels brand. And I just want to have that gold, that tinsel that you typically see on the tree. As always, make sure you clean your stamps after you use acrylic paint with them. I usually spray it with my Murphy soap and scrub it with a stencil brush. So I had gotten some ornament cutouts with my silhouette, a cut file that I had that I bought, and I had cut out all these ornaments, and that was kind of my idea for this page, but it just didn't ever quite seem to go. So I decided that I am going to limit it to two of them, two of the shapes, and I'm going to cut out some white ones just to see the placement. I'm not sure if I'm going to use the white ones at this point in time and paint them in some fashion. They end up being just placeholders to help me organize my page. So just doing a quick cut. This page took me a long time. It was about an hour and a half, an hour, 40 minutes in total. So it sped up quite a bit. There was just lots of little pitsy little things, and I just wasn't sure which way I was going. So a lot of indecision, kind of fussy placing. Where do I want this? Where do I want? And I did many turns and changes as the page evolved. I had the idea of using my Tim Holtz Crazy Birds and the saying for calling birds, and I wanted them to be in the ornaments, but I really struggled. It took a long time for me to even sit down and start this page. So I'm thinking I'm going to use this part of the stencil from the silhouette cut file, and I was going to paint them white, going over with a couple layers of white gesso, and then I decide I'm going to go with black gesso. I think that's going to be really striking. So I get out the black gesso and a piece of cut and dry foam, and I'm stamping that through the stencil. And I really like how this really pops. And I'm thinking the four birds, if I color them bright, they're going to look lovely off of this. Now what you can't see from this view is because of the salt and the texture that's on the page, the black paint doesn't cover completely. The edges are really rough, and there's places that I would have to go in and add more paint. And you're going to see me do that in a few minutes. So I'm just doing a little bit more of this fussy placing. Just indecision was totally mine. So my plan was to have the four birds in these ornaments, and then the phrase down the other side, for calling birds. And I was thinking that maybe I would get that cut out using the silhouette, or printing it off with some free fonts onto paper. So I stamped the Tim Holtz birds, the Crazy Birds, with Stays On ink, and then I'm getting out my Inktense pencils, and I just want four bright colors for these birds. They're going to go on the black. The background is kind of that greenish blue, and so I'm just picking four colors. I tried to add a little bit of shading, a light and a dark for each of the birds, but painting and coloring and that thing is, it's not really my favorite part of art journaling. And I definitely don't possess the skill that you see when I see people on YouTube using their Copics and coloring and shading. So I'm just using a small round brush, and I dip it in water. I do have a water brush. I just don't like to use it. I don't like the nib on it. I'm not sure. I just prefer, it's just as easy for me, especially if I'm in my home studio, to grab a brush. So one thing that I do when I am using my Inktense pencils, I just set them to the side so I know which colors that I've used, so they don't go back into the tray until I'm all done with them. And that helps me remember, and if I wanted to keep track Now I could have, and I think you'll see at some point later on in the video, just taking the wet brush and rubbing it to the tip of the pencil. I could have dug out my blocks and done it the same way and just basically rubbed the wet brush on the block and then painted it onto the Angry Birds. So now I'm going to add some darker colors onto each of the birds just to add that little bit of interest, more visual interest, and have it not look so flat. Again, this is something that's fairly new to me and definitely don't have any expertise in it. My main goal here is to have these be very bright so they really pop when I put them on the bulb, the black bulb or ball. I love my Inktense blocks and my pencils, and I ended up getting the pencils before the blocks, and I got the blocks because I ended up using the pencils all the time by applying the wet brush to the tip. And so if I was to do that again, I would probably not get the pencils. I would go straight for the blocks and get the biggest set that I can afford. If you shop on Amazon, and I'm going to put a link to that, they do vary quite a bit in price, and you may be able to get a really good deal like I did. But if you like coloring and with pencil crayons and stuff, then maybe the pencil crayons are for you. So again, you have to fit your style. So earlier I said that there was a lot of places here where you did not see, it didn't cover and the edges weren't crisp. So I just grabbed a flat brush and I have the gesso there, and I am just cleaning up and giving better coverage here for these ornaments. And I'm just pressing the brush into it. I lay the brush next to the edge of the ornament and then press into it. And that's a way of getting a good crisp line. So suddenly I get the idea that I am going to put more ornaments on the page. 4 of them are going to have birds in them. The other few are not. So I'm getting out my white testers, and I'm sure these are going to end up with paint on them at some point later down the road and show up on another page. The silhouette cut file, they're actually quite big. This is probably 50% of that size, and these are still quite big. And since sponging it on, I had to go and paint. I'm just painting this on and skipping that step. So whatever you feel more comfortable with, there's always more than one way to do the same thing. So I have a thin flat brush here that I'm using for the hangers, and then I'm going to get my larger flat brush for it. You can see I'm just putting it near the edge and pushing it down to get that nice crisp line, and turning the page as I need. As always, it's a good idea to have some of your objects fall off the page. It gives the impression that there's more to it, that it continues beyond the page. And I'm using my black gesso. It's a Demco brand. I love this black gesso. It is smooth and creamy and so easy to work with. So now I have my birds and I'm just arranging them how I want to. And I think one of my struggles is that there's 4, and typically you always have odd numbers of things. And because this is 4 calling birds, it's just throwing me off. So I decide, okay, enough, I'm not going to overthink it. I get out my Stays On white stamp pad, which again I bought and I really haven't utilized a whole lot. But I figured I'm going to stamp with the white on the black bulb so that the feet and the hair, the little tufts of hair, show up. I'm not sure how much of a difference this made in the final end of things, but this is something that I've seen people do on YouTube, and I thought, okay, I'm going to give it a try. I'm going to try test out this. So I'm just applying matte medium to the black ball and then the back of the crazy bird, and I'm just adhering it down. And because I'm using matte medium, excuse me, it won't shine off the black. And that's one of the reasons that I chose not to use Mod Podge here. So now I'm thinking that I'm going to put the words in the remaining balls. Now what you see here is the inside, the mask part of the cut file. And as you can see, it has lots of frilly designs on it. And I decide I'm just going to get out my gold paint and stamp that on. So it just has a gold design. The cut and dry foams that you see me use, when I'm done with them, I throw them into the tub of water and I just rinse them out with my Murphy's oil soap, and they last quite a while. Got leftover gold paint, so I'm just edging the page here. I like how the gold that's inside the balls goes with the gold that's in the tree. So I'm getting my jelly roll pens, and I have my gold one, and I'm outlining all the black ones. And my idea at this time was to just do all of them. And then I realized, well, I have all sorts of different colored metallics. So I grab a metallic that matches the crazy bird. And so each of those ornaments get the color that matches the bird. In real life, this actually shows up quite well. So I get out my Stabilo oil pencil and decide to draw the lines up for the hanging ornaments to the top. That's just to give me a guideline. And being a Stabilo, it'll be water soluble, and when I go over it with black paint later, thin black paint. So this is Liquitex Basics paint, and I've just thinned it. And I'm using a small round brush. You can use a liner brush, and I do grab my liner brush later. Then I decide that I need to paint the tops of each of the ornaments, and I want them all to be gold, so they have that in common. The gold is rather translucent though, so it took me a couple coats to do it, and it's less than precise. Wasn't exactly happy with how it worked, but I do like how the gold, because I put gold on all of them, it kind of made them all look very much the same. So I get a bit of the green with the black, and I'm just stamping in the opening of the for the ornament. And I grab my liner brush and I'm just putting a little bow and string hanging down from each of the ornaments. I decided to get out my letters, and instead of building the word all together, I am stamping each of the letters one at a time. This way you can squeeze the letters in closer and fit it into a smaller place. I don't want it to be bigger than the width of the ornament. So, and you can play with how you want the letters to look. Oh, if you want them overlapped or you want them curvy or however you want them, you can just have fun. Then I decide that I'm going to cut some of that white off. It's a little too stark on this page. It doesn't seem to fit. So I'm just cutting around it a little bit. This is something that I've started doing a little bit more of. Sometimes I want the white, but this wasn't the case. So I'm getting some thinned acrylic paint and with the liner brush, and I'm just painting in the letters. I just want them a little darker. I could have probably avoided this step if I had stamped the letters with the black acrylic paint to begin with. My battery on my camera starts flashing and telling me that it's low battery. So I'm cutting in and out of different things, giving you a snippet of what I'm doing without showing you every part of it, just so I can finish the video without having to stop and recharge the battery. So I'm applying pouring medium onto these birds. I want these birds to shine. I want the colors to become more vibrant. And I've discovered by accident that using pouring medium does that. So I give each of these birds a couple coats of this pouring medium. So after giving these 2 coats, I'm just going to let it dry and the page is done. So here's the finished page. I really like how it turned out. It is what was in my head, although I did seem to have a hard time getting it out of my head. But sometimes when you're going and doing a project, you just need to go with the flow. There you can see how the stamping with acrylic paint on the background gives such interesting visual and physical texture. There you can see the salt technique, the effects that you get. Thank you so much. Give me a thumbs up and leave a comment. Love to hear from you.